How's it going, everyone? I'm Dylan, this is All You Can Board, and this is another Marvel Champions preview, this time for a new hero that was just announced today by Fantasy Flight Games, and that is going to be Psylocke. And Psylocke will be the first hero pack that releases after the big box X-Force expansion, and she is slated to come out in September as of now, which is still a while away, so things can change before then, but right now it's September. So the unique aspect that Psylocke's going to be bringing is that she has these two Psi energy upgrades. And so basically they're going to be, I'm not super familiar with the Psylocke character, but I imagine based on the thematics and stuff that we'll get into, it's her two Psi energy knives. And you're going to have those in play, and you're going to be flipping them and exhaust them to do a few different things as we go. So that's her sort of unique ability that you'll see come into play. And she also has the Psionic trait, and the Psionic trait will come into play with a few different things as well. So we're going to jump right into the previewing all the cards that were announced, and starting as we always do with the alter ego. So the alter ego here is Betsy Braddock, and she has a recovery of 3, hit points of 10, hand size of 6, and her first ability is Psionic Manifestation. So this is a setup ability that says put your 2 Psi energy upgrades into play, Psi-Knife side face up. So we'll get into those after we do the alter ego and the hero, but essentially, like I mentioned, these are going to be 2 upgrade cards that are identical, I believe they're identical, that are going to be her knives that she's holding, and you're going to be flipping them and using them for a few different things. Basically, when you start a game with Psylocke, they are going to start in play with the Psi-Knife side up. The other ability that she has is an action ability, and that is exhaust 1 Psi energy upgrade, so one of the 2 that you have, to shuffle 1 psionic card from your discard pile into your deck. So that's where the Psionic Trait is going to come into play in a big way with Psylocke, and when she's an alter ego specifically, because you're going to be able to retrieve some of your most powerful Psionic Trait cards with these upgrades using this action ability, and get them back into your deck to hopefully come up later on. And obviously, the thinner that your deck is, the quicker that they're going to come up. If you have like only enough cards in your deck for one draw of a hand size, you're going to be drawing them next time. So there's some ways you can manipulate this to be able to get these cards a little bit quicker. But overall, just being able to get those specific Psionic cards back means that Psionic cards are going to be more overtly powerful for Psylocke, just because even if there are more powerful cards in your deck than those specific cards, the fact that you can trigger getting them back is a huge deal. And so you're going to probably deck build around those, especially if we get more Psionic cards that are introduced into the game as we go. Keeping in mind that you can basically tutor for those out of your discard pile and get multiple uses out of them, really, really good. So our hero side is going to be, of course, Psylocke. So Psylocke's stat line is 112. There's a star next to each of those. We'll get into why in pretty much right now. But I will mention that she does have a hand size of 4. So it doesn't go down to 5, it goes down to 4. But as you'll see when we get into the Psi energy upgrades, that hand size of 4 isn't going to be as detrimental as other heroes that have a lower hand size. It's still not great, but we have a way to sort of circumvent that. So her ability here is Psi Energy Control. Psi Energy Control is an interrupt that says when you use one of Psylocke's basic powers, thwart, attack, or defense, flip 1 Psi Energy upgrade. So this is going to be one of your most reliable ways to flip those upgrades. It's not optional, you have to flip one. I think we're going to talk right away about a case where it says you may flip. In this case, you have to flip, so you're going to kind of have to keep in mind as you're using her basic powers, which side you want to be on, which side you want to end your turn on, and because you have 2, do I want 1 on each side, do I want 1 on both sides? Once you start to learn what those upgrades are, you'll have a better idea of how you're going to manipulate them, but this is going to be your main way of doing that. So all that being said, we need to talk about these Psi energy upgrades. This is a big part of Psylocke. So they do have 2 sides, and as I did mention, there are 2 Psi energy upgrades, but I believe they're identical. So we're just going to talk obviously about one. So the first side that we're going to talk about is the Psi-Knife side. This is the side you're going to start on when you start the game. Both of your upgrades will start on this side. It is a permanent. Psylocke will get +1 thwart, which means your thwart goes from 1 to 2. And hero resource is exhaust Psi-Knife to generate a mind resource. You may flip this card. So you have the option to flip this to the Katana side, which we're going to talk about right away. But you have this option to just always have a resource to generate. So when I mentioned that we have a low hand size when you're in hero form of 4, this sort of offsets that in that you'll have 2 upgrades in play that are going to be able to generate resources for you. So even though you have a hand size of 4, you have 2 resources that you can generate right off the bat as soon as you start a game with Psylocke. So it's almost as if you have a 6-card hand size, but 2 of those cards must be used as resources, and they're not thinning your deck. So it's not quite hitting the 6 card hand size, but it's at least better than just having a straight 4 card hand size that you're having to manage, having less resources to pay for things. You will have 2 guaranteed resources every turn to be able to pay for stuff unless these have been exhausted some way. So this side is the one that's boosting your thwart +1. As you can imagine, we're going to talk about the other side. This is the Psi-Katana. This side is going to boost your attack by +1. And you also generate a resource on this side. This side is exhaust Psi-Katana to generate a strength resource, and you may flip this card. So again, either side is going to be able to generate resources for you. One's boosting your thwart, one's boosting your attack. You're going to have to manage both. You have 2 of these. You're going to have to manage which side you want to be in and how you want to boost your stats to be able to most effectively use Psylocke. You might want to have both on the knife side so that your thwart is now boosted to +3, and be using the resources there. And then every time you use a resource, decide whether you want to be flipping one to the katana side, depending on what you want to accomplish. Really, really cool. It's neat that they started in play. You don't have to worry about trying to hunt them down. It's neat that you can generate 2 resources right off the bat, again, to offset that lower hand size. I think it's going to be a neat play mechanic to be able to work not only with the Psionic trait, but just with these 2 upgrades that you have right from the get-go. She has an established kit right from the start. Okay, talking about the first card here, so Flurry, I was going to say Flurry of Blades. Flurry of Blades, 3-cost event, hero action, attack, deal 2 damage to an enemy. For each Psi-Knife you control, choose an enemy and confuse it. For each Psi-Katana you control, choose an enemy and deal 2 damage to it. So as we're going to see now with some of these cards, they're going to be influenced by which side your upgrades are on. So depending, again, it's not just what you want to use those Psi energy upgrades for, it's also how you want them to influence the cards that you're going to be playing. So there's going to be a lot of tactical thinking of on your turn, which side you want them to be on and where, and depending on what you're going to draw into next turn, how you want to start that turn, things like that. So for a cost of 3, dealing 2 damage to an enemy, obviously not good, very low. But again, that's not the extent of the ability. So the fact that then you have the option to be able to confuse the enemy that you're dealing damage to increases. It's still probably, I don't know for 3 if I'm really excited to do 2 damage and confuse the enemy. But again, for each Psi-Katana you have in play, which you can have 1 knife and 1 katana, at that point you're dealing 4 damage for 3 and confusing an enemy. The confusion is a bigger deal for Psylocke. Well, as we get into more cards, you'll see that she has a lot of cards that confuse and cards that benefit from confusion. So I don't want to downplay the importance of that confuse, but it is and it's always great. It's not quite as good as a stun, in my opinion, or at least the times I've played. It depends on the villain, depends on a lot of situations. So the fact that we're losing some damage, which I love dealing, huge amounts of damage with cards in Marvel Champions, to be able to get that confused, and for a cost of 3, which is already a bit steep, I would have loved to see a little bit more damage coming out of this card, but I understand. I still think it's a good card, and again, that confuses a big deal with Psylocke. Mental Detection, 2-cost event, hero action thwart, remove 1 threat from a scheme. For each Psi-Knife you control, remove 2 additional threats. For each Psi-Katana you control, draw 1 card. I love this card. This is a really, really good card because you have the potential to remove 5 threat for 2 if you have both your knives in play, which is a phenomenal card. I don't know how many copies of Mental Detection we have in our deck. I didn't do the calculation with the numbers on the bottom of the card. I'm sure someone will, and you can post in the comments. But especially if we have multiple copies, having a reliable way to be able to remove 5 threat for 2 is really, really good. Makes her a very, very good Justice hero, or just not even just Injustice, but just being able to be a good threat manager. But on top of that, being able to say, okay, well, I'm going to have 1 katana in play, so then it becomes for 2, remove 3 threat and draw a card, which is also phenomenal. Getting that extra card draw to kind of offset what you paid for this card, still removing 3 threat for 2, which is kind of like that baseline that we've seen on a lot of cards. This is just a solid all-around card. I love it. I think this is going to be one of the MVP cards in the Psylocke deck for sure. Then we've got Psionic Redirect, 2-cost event, hero interrupt defense. When you would take any amount of damage from an enemy attack, prevent 2 of that damage. For each Psi-Katana you control, prevent 2 additional damage. For each Psi-Knife you control, confuse that enemy. So again, ideal situation here, I would imagine, is you have 1 katana, 1 knife in play, and for 2, you're then preventing 4 damage for 2 and confusing the enemy that was trying to damage you. That is really, really good value. Not only are you likely preventing most, if not all, of the damage that's coming your way. 4 damage is a lot to prevent. Depends on on like if you're playing multiplayer, what villain you're playing, but I would say it's taken a huge chunk off at the very least of what's coming towards you. But on top of that, you're also setting yourself up for success potentially on the next turn if you're going to end an alter ego, because now the enemy is going to be confused as well. So there's just tons of benefits to this card. Really, really solid card. Then we've got our signature ally, which is Angel. Angel is a 3-cost ally with 1 thwart, 2 attack, a consequential damage on each of those, and 3 health. And simple ability here, after you play Angel from your hand, ready your identity. So that is specifically good for Psylocke because you, again, are going to be boosting her basic stats. I mean, there's multiple reasons it's good, but one of the key reasons is you're going to be boosting those basic stats with her knives and her katanas. So, you know, depending, you may have used her basic ability to start at the start of your turn or at some point earlier on in your turn because you needed to, you know, do some damage or remove some threat off of a side scheme, something like that. And then to be able to have moved or flipped the knives or the katanas around to different sides, maybe now all of a sudden your thwart is higher. Maybe now you've boosted to 3, whereas originally you had to use it for its base 1 for some reason. Now Angel comes in, you're able to get a reuse of that really strong ability. Maybe you did use it for 3, and now you're able to use it for 3 again, and you have now thwarted for 6 off your basic ability. Just obviously, it's always really good to get a free ready on your identity, and Angel's no difference. And the same thing as if you had done a really great defense with Psylocke, but she had to you know, start your turn exhausted. Now you can, you know, free her up to be able to do stuff on your turn. So pretty solid ally. The 2 attack is also especially good with the 3 health. You can, if you don't want to block with Angel, you get another 6 damage potentially coming out of Angel as well. On top of that, ready. It's a solid ally, not the best signature ally we've seen or anything like that, but I think it's going to be one that's pretty reliable. Weapons Training. So Weapons Training is a 2-cost upgrade that says Psylocke gains Retaliate 1, so you'd have a permanent Retaliate 1 as long as this is in play, and a hero response that says after Psylocke attacks, discard Weapons Training, ready each weapon upgrade you control. So again, this is, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be other you know, deck building you can do to incorporate some other weapon upgrades potentially and have this even go a little bit further, but just based on the cards that come with Psylocke, obviously that's going to affect her 2 Psi energy upgrades, her knives or katanas. So being able to ready those and then get extra energy or you know, strength energy, mind energy to be able to use to pay for other cards, really, really solid. This only costs 2. You're kind of almost recouping the cost of this card by readying both if you're able to ready both at the same time. That's kind of probably how you want to time it out is, you know, do everything you want to do on your turn, end with an attack that then leads to Weapons Training being discarded. Ready both of those, get 2 resources back, potentially be able to pay for some more cards. Lots of potential there. Pretty neat card as well. And the Retaliate 1 is just sort of like the gravy. Psionic Training, so 1-cost upgrade. Psylocke now ignores the guard and patrol keywords. Again, a little situational, but in those situations, really good. After Psylocke thwarts, you're also going to discard this, but that's going to be to confuse an enemy. So both of these training cards do get discarded when certain key moments are met. This one specifically is when you thwart, the other one is when you attack, and this one you're going to confuse an enemy. Again, confusion is obviously great. It's especially good in the cards that are coming in the Psylocke pack, just because there's multiple cards that confuse and there's some cards that benefit from that, and we obviously already have some cards in the game that specifically benefit from confusion, or will say things like if the enemy's already confused, do this. You might be able to get some really cool deck building happening with Psylocke as well. Okay, so getting into the Justice cards, this is a Justice hero, at least in the pack that you buy. This is going to be the first Justice ally, and it is Captain Britain. This is a 4-cost ally. I'm just realizing now his name's Brian Braddock. I don't know enough about the comics, but I'm assuming he's related to Psylocke. I didn't know that. So 4-cost ally, 3 health, 3 thwart, 3 attack, but we have 2 consequential damage on both of those, but with stars on them. We'll come back to that. I keep saying we're going to come back to it. I'm about to mention it right now. I'm coming back to this right now. Captain Britain takes a -1 consequential damage after he thwarts a side scheme or attacks a minion. So specifically, I mean, you can attack the villain, you can go after the main scheme, but ideally what you want to be doing, especially for an ally that costs, you know, on the higher end with 4, you want to be specifically attacking minions, specifically thwarting side schemes, because at that point, you're getting way more mileage out of Captain Britain. You know, with 3 attack and 3 thwart, you have the potential to do 9 threat removal, 9 attack, or a mixture of 6 and 3, whatever the case may be, over the course of his health. And obviously there's ways for you to boost his health or heal him even more. So his stat line is so good that you really want to prioritize minions and side schemes. And if you do that, I think the value for a 4-cost ally is going to be there in spades. I think it's going to be more if you put out Captain Britain and find that you have to attack the villain for some reason, or you have to be going after the main scheme, you're not going to be getting the mileage you should be getting out of a 4-cost ally, and at that point it might seem a little bit disappointing. All right, next up we've got Cypher. This is a 2-cost ally, 1 thwart, 1 attack, 2 health. We've seen that stat line before. The response here, after Cypher attacks and damages a confused enemy, draw a card. This is one of the best examples we're going to see in this deck of cards for the benefits of confusion that Psylocke has. So the fact that you can potentially draw 2 cards off this and get 2 damage through for 2 is really good. You completely recoup the cost of the card that you paid. You got a couple damage in as well. You had the option to block if you needed, if you didn't take it, but you can still use it where you kind of paid for 2, attack once, draw that card, recoup some of that cost essentially, and then use it to block as well as a chump block or whatever, and still be able to protect yourself from a bunch of damage coming your way. So lots of flexibility in Cypher, and again, that's not taking into account ways that you can boost your allies' health or boost their stats and get even more mileage out of Cypher. So all around, just a really solid ally. I think we'll definitely see it played in different situations, and especially ones where, I mean, I say different situations. The situations are going to be when you have a way to manipulate confusion effectively. Psylocke has that, so I think Psylocke is a great place for this card. Upside the Head, so this is a 1-cost event. Hero response, after your hero makes a basic attack and damages an enemy, confuse that enemy, but if that enemy is already confused, stun it instead. This is another one of the top cards that's going to come in this deck that works off the confusion mechanic, because you are likely going to have the enemy be confused a lot of the time. So for one, being able to now stun that enemy as well, I mean, to have them confused and stunned going into their turn is obviously, I mean, going into potentially their next 2 turns even if you're playing solo, is just really, really good. So this is a really reliable card in this deck specifically. Beyond Psylocke, I think it's just going to matter if you're building decks specifically to take advantage of Confuse. If you're not going to be using this card, and if you are, you're likely going to want to include this card. Float Like a Butterfly. So this is a 2-cost upgrade. Play under any player's control, max 1 per player. Interrupt when a character you control attacks a confused enemy, increase the amount of damage that attack deals to the enemy by 1. So again, simple card, really working off that confused mechanic. Being able to increase the damage by 1 is, might seem minuscule, but again, this is not a one-time use. This is an upgrade. This is staying in play. And because you're going to have so many ways to confuse the enemy, keep them confused, and have that be reliable, that extra 1 damage is going to add up. If you get this out really, really early in the game, especially like on the first turn, tracking how much damage this ends up boosting over the course of the game, it could easily add up to 10, 12 extra damages you're doing, depending on how long the game goes and how effective you are at keeping enemies confused. But it's just a great kit card to get out early, and it's one that in this deck specifically you're really, really going to benefit from. Okay, final Justice card is Lay the Trap. This is a player side scheme. If you didn't watch the X-Force expansion video, this is a brand new card type that's coming to Marvel Champions. With that expansion, it is side schemes that are beneficial to the player. That's why they're called player side schemes. You want to defeat these and you get a bonus when you do. So Lay the Trap is 3 threat per player that you have to remove. So it'll obviously increase depending if you're playing multiplayer or solo. When defeated, the player who defeated this scheme deals 5 damage per player to the villain. So again, what's great about cards like this is that, a lot of times, especially playing solo, if you're playing a solo Justice hero, if that's something you want to be doing, if you have a lot of fun playing that style, you're always still having to kind of weigh the fact that, yes, I can manage this threat really, really well, but I still need to deal damage to the enemy. I need to be able to defeat the villain to be able to win. This is another way now to be able to reliably do what you do best, threat removal, and have it work out that you end up dealing damage because of it. So especially if you have ways to not specifically do all your all your threat removal to a single scheme, like there are cards where it'll say, remove 3 threat from this scheme, and then also remove 3 threat from another scheme or something. If you can be sort of maximizing things, so you don't have to just specifically target Lay the Trap, you're still managing the main scheme, but also picking away at this, eventually you're dealing 5 damage. Sort of it's gonna feel like for free because you're not having to spend a bunch of time, honing in on this. It's getting its threat removed by other things that you're already doing. So depending how you deck build, this could be a really, really reliable card, and just having that way to deal damage as a Justice character is obviously really good. Okay, finally, we've got 2 basic cards to talk about. The first one is the Power of the Mind. So this one is it generates a mind resource, and the ability is double the number of resources that this card generates while paying for a psionic card. Obviously, perfect in Psylocke. It'll be perfect in any character deck that uses a lot of psionic cards to be able to just essentially get another resource generator that generates 2 resources. So if that's something you really need, if you need more ways to generate resources in your deck, and you have a bunch of psionic cards, Power of the Mind is the one that you're going to go to, and I think that's really all there is to say about that card. Lastly, we've got Telepathy, a 1-cost upgrade. Play only if your identity has a psionic trait, max 1 per player. Hero action thwart, exhaust Telepathy, and spend 2 mind resources. Remove 2 threat from a scheme. So it's really cool to be able to have an upgrade in play that can reliably continue to remove threat for you, that you always have this way in a pinch to spend 2 resources to remove 2 threat. It's not the most efficient way to remove threat by any means, but what you're trading off for efficient or for value, you're getting this efficient card that you can sort of always fall back on as like, oh, I really need to chip away at this main scheme. It's getting out of control, or I'm too off on this one, or I'm if whatever the case may be. It's just, if you are in a situation where you end up with a hand that you can't remove threat, you always have a way to remove some threat. And it might be what saves you between a scheme, getting overloaded or not. So yes, it's a steep cost for what it's given you, but that reliability of it always being played is a trade-off, and I think that makes it pretty good. That is it. That is Psylocke. Again, I don't think she's going to be the most complex hero by any means that we've had introduced, but there are going to be a lot of things you're managing between the psionic trait and having to deck build around that, and also kind of manage and be keeping track of which cards are in your discard pile, in your hand, in your deck that have that psionic trait, but then on top of that also having your psi energy cards and having to not only have them and use them, but manage which side they're on and when you want to flip them and when you have to flip them. There's enough to manage. I think she's going to be a little bit more on the complex end, but I think it's probably going to be a hero that once you've played her a couple times, you sort of get the flow and you realize the things that she can do and what you have to manage, and then it kind of goes smoothly from there. So I'm excited to play Psylocke. We've got a little bit of a wait here until September, but it's exciting that we're getting all these X-Force preview articles and seeing more of the X-Force members. I was hoping the first one was going to be Deadpool, but they might be saving Deadpool for the end. I was kind of thinking how when Marvel Champions got released, Captain America was the first hero pack after. When I think X-Force, I don't know the comics very well, but based on my knowledge of like the Marvel movies and things like that, when I think X-Force, I think Deadpool right away. So for some reason I thought it was going to be Deadpool as the first one, but hopefully we get Deadpool soon so we can all see what they did with that hero pack. I'm really excited for Deadpool. You've probably heard me mention it a lot of times, but I'm still excited for Psylocke too. So hope you enjoyed the preview. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, or let me know your thoughts on Psylocke if you agree or disagree with me on any of these cards. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.